Many years ago, I was dating this amazing soul connection. And what I've learned about the soul contract experience is that there is a process of integration of your higher self into your everyday self. And the soul contract helps you, like a twin flame experience is a great example of this. But also the divine ray experience. I was talking to somebody last night, one of my channels, about this. And they help you to connect with your soul's truth, to realize what parts of you are out of alignment with that truth, what parts of you are buried, are hidden, are repressed. And it's a process, a dance even, where if you're up for the journey, if you're up for the experience, you start to upgrade yourself to match that higher calling. But until that matching, it can be quite messy. And what you'll see is that some of the behavior patterns that people have in their everyday life are just really not up to par with who their soul is trying to help them transform into. And so the soul contract experience is about leveling each other up. So I was with one of these beautiful connections, divine ray potential. And what I observed is that we were not actually ready for each other, and had lessons that we had to work out with other people. Primarily, what I found interesting is that we would connect on this very high vibrational essence, bring each other to tears with gratitude and joy, and relish the otherworldly connection. Very, very magical. And then we would come back down to earth. And that's when the problem started. Because they had obligations and were still enmeshed in a relationship that was toxic by their words. And I perceived that it was infiltrating in our connection. So anytime that they would get closer to me, the other party would try to pull them back, even though they were separated, even though they had been separated for a long time, but there was still an ownership and a possession of him that was bleeding into our connection. And I found that I had some deep shadow work left to do, in that I was still having trouble expressing myself and being seen. And the journey that I needed to take, I couldn't do with him. I needed somebody else to pull that out of me. And I found a perfect partner actually to do exactly that. And amazingly enough, they allowed me to be seen through that process and held the space for me. And I really appreciate them for that. But what I found is this resistance to the divine ray partner. Now I'm going back to that one. I found this resistance to me expressing myself, particularly if I was disappointed or if I was in any sort of lower density emotion. And also, I've seen this with some of my soul partners that have been very, very heavy in their polarity of masculine energy. They have been uncomfortable by my own expression of my integration of my masculine energy. And because they were still abandoning their feminine energy, they needed somebody that was fully present in their feminine. And it created discord whenever I would shift in between the energetic states because they hadn't integrated that parts of themselves. So similarly, when people are in their shadow with negative emotions, and it reminds me of my personal journey, I used to be so suppressed. So much so that I remember sitting in a therapist's office, couples counseling. And this was eons ago. And the therapist asked me how I was feeling. And I told him, fine. And he said, really? Because it looks like you're angry. And I was. But I was disconnected from my emotional experience of anger. And this manifested itself in being uncomfortable with anybody who is angry. See how this works? And in fact, I would try to control or alleviate people's anger around me because I didn't know how to deal with it myself. And so when we are in our shadow, we have a hard time seeing others embody that which we have abandoned, rejected, or set aside. And so the divine ray partner, when confronted with negative emotions in me, similarly would try to control, diminish, disapprove, or even sidestep in its entirety. And this is where the term spiritual bypassing comes from, where you don't actually deal with the challenges, and instead you try to say, let's just manifest a happy outcome. Let's just take our attention away from this signal there might be an issue. And instead of working on it together, let's actually not talk about it. Let's think positive. And it's interesting because I've seen this pattern quite a lot, probably because I come from this pattern. So now that I'm on the other side of it, I help people with it. So I see it a lot in my client work. I see it a lot in my personal life. Well, not so much anymore, but I used to. In that people very often shut down the emotions that they don't know how to process. And they either disconnect from their experience or they bury themselves in distractions or addictions, or they try to use positive psychology and to almost negate the entire experience by sidestepping it and not sitting or surrendering into the emotional experience. Sometimes they even go as far as to deny, like I did. How are you feeling? Fine. You look angry. I'm not angry. Are you sure? Can you describe what you feel in your body? I feel tightness in my chest, a knot in my stomach. I feel tension in my shoulders, and my fists are balled up, and my jaw is tight, clenched even. I might be angry. Imagine being so disconnected from the emotional experience that you inside cannot identify the emotion, but your body can, your subconscious can, and other people around you can if they are in tune to those emotions. That's where I started from. And what's interesting is that I acted out on my anger in passive-aggressive ways, sometimes destructive ways, oblivious to the fact that I was carrying that anger. And so as a result, my conflict resolution style was a mess. And my go-to strategies for resolving issues were very immature because I was suppressing the knowledge within that there was a problem. And anger is a very, very powerful tool for telling you when somebody has crossed a line or is about to cross a line, or where they haven't crossed a line, but you need to make a line because you realize that you're not okay with something. It is how you show up in the world to shape it in the way that you need to get your needs met, including to be respected, to be honored, to be seen and heard. And so when we are not actually connected with the experience of our anger, we lose our power. And that doesn't mean to say that all anger is power, because it can be a very, very destructive emotion when it's utilized improperly. But understanding and having the awareness of it is critical for shaping your behavior to create outcomes that actually serve your highest good. And when you're not connected to that experience, you lose an opportunity to show up in the world in a potentially elevated, empowered state of being. And when you're in your shadow with anger, then that's where a lot of turbulence can happen that you're surprised by because you don't understand why you're angry or even that you are angry. And so you accept things from people that you should not accept because you feel like the problem is you. And when you start acting out, then you feel like I'm the one that is out of control. When you're triggered, probably for a good reason, because maybe you're not being treated in the way that you deserve to be treated. And intuitively you know this. But instead of processing the anger and getting to the root of that and having the appropriate conversations, you start spiraling and acting out in ways that then you regret, that then causes you guilt, that then causes you to overcompensate and to appease other people to make them feel better for your acting out, when actually you need to address an issue about not being treated properly, just in this fictitious example. And you never get to address somebody else's behavior because you're the one with your tail in between your legs the whole time, feeling like you're the problem child, when in reality, you actually need to have a constructive conversation about somebody's behavior and how it is infringing upon something meaningful to you. You see how there's a big difference in how you behave and how you guide the universe and others to treat you in your life that you have created, your creation, your reality. You get to influence the environment around you and ask people to treat you in certain ways that make you feel honored, respected, loved, listened to, whatever your values are. And we all have them. We all have our own list. And so if somebody is not treating you the way that you want to be treated, anger is what signals to you that something needs to change. That's why emotional suppression and the processing of these more challenging emotions is very, very important to get to the root of the trigger. And sometimes it takes many passes, because when we are very, very disconnected from our negative emotional experience, or especially if we don't know how to discharge the emotions, then we don't have the practice peeling back the layers. This is what I do in my client work. And it takes a lot of energy, a lot of conversation. And then sometimes we still don't get it on the first or the second try. But we go at it incredibly deeply. And we go as long as we need to get to the very, very bottom of things. It's beautiful to see it when it starts to unfold. So, being connected to the emotional experience is different from acting out on it in destructive ways. But expressing it has its power too. And I have recently been working on this as part of my developmental journey. So imagine starting from the therapist's couch, completely oblivious to what was going on inside. And now getting to the point where I'm expressing correctly, constructively, assertively to people who I believe that are in their shadow or are not treating me the way that I deserve and want to be treated. And here's what I have found. There are people who appreciate your emotional expressions, and those are healthy people, generally speaking. They welcome it, they understand it, they appreciate your authenticity. And then there are others that cannot stand it. Absolutely, it is such an amazing litmus test, because it will reveal to you the level of emotional intelligence and maturity that people have. And when somebody can hold space for your emotional experience, that is a mark of somebody who can hold space for their own. And that, in my opinion, is an emotionally intelligent person. And it doesn't mean that people are perfect. But what it means is that when you find people like that, they are gems, because it's rare, actually. It's actually, from my vantage point, rare to find those that are so authentic, so honest, and so expressive that they can handle the negative experience and unpack it within themselves and talk about it in a constructive way with somebody else and allow somebody else to do the same. And that's when we start to get to this next level relationship. The conscious relationship of people who have done the work, who understand what the work is, and who also understand that it's not always about the good feels and the bliss, although that's wonderful emotions. Those are wonderful states of being. It's actually about the full experience of being human. And it is our selection of behaviors which matter. And so expressing oneself and choosing how to express oneself is very, very important, because it can veer into territories that are not pleasant for anybody. But being able to do so, like make art from it, for example, to make music from it, to channel it into business, into creating content, and to discharge it, the emotional charge, the energy behind it, to do so into something that is beautiful or constructive is a pinnacle, in my opinion, of self-mastery. Even just having a moment of an outburst that is contained, that is not frightening for people, but gets it out, that is creating the womb, which allows for the birthing and the rebirthing of what I believe is a fragmented human. There's something about our societal structures which have compartmentalized us and have told us how to behave, have told us how to have relationships and what is appropriate, and have told us how to be spiritual conscious beings. And I disagree with some, not all, or even a lot, but I disagree with some of the social mores, because I believe that it perpetuates the fracturing and the fragmentation of our existence and our states of being, when the beauty of our experience is to encompass it all of our sensation, all of our feeling, and then to understand it at this deep, deep reservoir level, to get to this very center of it, and to surrender into that deep well, and to not be afraid, and to take a breath there, and to slowly re-emerge, having an ounce more of wisdom than we did previously.